Welcome to Beneath the Surface podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Bortz, the Millennial Rabbi. Join me as we talk to high-impact people around the world, discovering deep, meaningful ways to live life beneath the surface. Erick Godsey is a cognitive psychologist and psychonaut and the AM community director at Onnit, focusing on total human optimization. He's trying to figure out how the individual can transform who they are into who they could be. Hey, Erick, welcome.
Thank you for having me, brother. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Yourself?
I'm good. It's been a very busy couple of days, but this is exactly the life that I asked for, so I'm grateful for it.
That's awesome, man. I want to get right into it. I'm also curious how it feels to have the word God in your name. Is there an added responsibility in that, or you feel?
Dude, it's so interesting. I've thought about this a lot. So growing up, I was introduced to a very basic form of Christianity that was easily dismissible because no one around me was connected to it through their heart. It was just they would pantomime, or whatever the word is called, the scriptures. And so anyways, I lost faith early in my life. And then when I was a teenager, I was a radical atheist. I wanted to argue with every motherfucker. Can I cuss on here? I don't know.
Let's do it.
Okay. I would try to argue with anyone who would, claim that they believed in anything. And I thought I was being a seeker of truth, but really I was rebelling against, that childhood idea of God. And then in my early 20s, I started exploring psychedelics, and I'm more spiritual than most people I know, but to say that is to not be spiritual in some sense. But anyways, I've thought about my last name having God in it. And I really think what I have been doing for the last 27 years is trying to find God. And I feel like I have found a version of what that word means to me that resonates. And I don't need anyone else to accept it. I think it comes down to, does your idea of it help you live a better life? And if it does, cool, do it.
I love it. And we get so caught up on the name God. I have a rabbi I'm close with in Jerusalem who doesn't use the word, because there's so much baggage over history and time that, you talk to an astrophysicist and he'll talk about maybe there's an intelligence that kind of designed what's going on. You might talk to, a spiritual minded person who'll talk about the universe. I think we're often going to the same idea, maybe not the same, maybe depth of it or understanding of it. But for example, in Jewish mystical thinking, there's the way God uses his lower level of energy or light to create this universe. So what we're interacting with is not the essence. But be it as it may, we're all talking about a similar thing. And I think it's like you said, it's the name and the superficial way we often look at it. We dismiss it. But
and I think I thought about this a lot, and I really think it comes down to none of us can know capital T truth. We can infer to the best of our abilities. And so then I think it comes down to all language is a map of the forest. It's not the actual forest. And it comes down to be of the mind where you can look at more than one type of map, and then test the maps on your life, and then use the map that gives you the best life. And if that map involves using Yahweh or God or Jesus or Buddha or Allah, whatever it is, I think they're all experiments that you can run in the laboratory that is life.
No, definitely. You gotta, you were talking about if you can say you're spiritual, is that something that I believe? I mean, if we are all souls and we're all that is who we really are. So really, it's more weird when I go to the Western Wall in Jerusalem, or I go to a synagogue and someone's praying fervently, like really just they're totally oblivious to what's around them. Most people look at them like strangely, and to me, especially amongst my fellow, let's say, faith-based people, I'm like, this is what the norm should be. He's in that reality. We're so distracted by all the little temptations and things come our way here. So I think there's also an idea that the soul, before we're born, we learn all the truth and then we forget it when we're born. So when you're saying like everyone finds whatever resonates with you often is that truth that you just kind of like subconscious and you like connect with it.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I've got like 4 or 5 people in my mind, and one is the materialistic atheist. He's never going away. He's a part of the way that my mind sees the world. And then there's this woo-woo Jungian magician guy that will never go away either. And he's able to balance out the atheist. And then there's a third one, and it's like the evolutionary psychologist. Like, I think it's really fascinating to, as scientifically accurately as possible, understand the meat suit that our soul seems to have been put into, and consciousness, awareness, soul, whatever word you want to use to describe the thing behind the ego that pays attention to the ego. That thing has to learn how to be inside of a meat suit. And the meat suit can be understood through evolutionary psychology. And there's this tension between the spiritual life and being inside of a meat suit. And it's like, I think there's a middle way that I haven't quite found yet clearly articulated. I think Aubrey is doing his best to describe that path down the middle, where there is the praying at the wall where you're in a trance state and you are one with the numinous, and it's just God everywhere. But then there's taxes, procreating, trying to be a good father, trying to be a good friend, trying to run a business. And all those things are inside of the meat suit game. But there's also the spiritual game. And I think it's really interesting.
That is huge. Yeah. I I had a rabbi say Freud found all truthful stuff. He just didn't dig deep enough. Didn't go further.
Yeah.
So
yeah. There's a great critique of that Jordan Peterson makes of Richard Dawkins, and it's basically like he got it right, but if he went one step deeper, he'd be Jung. Like the idea of the meme actually being able to change genes, which would be like one step further, and then you get to Jung.
So unfortunately, we don't have endless time, but I'm very curious, what made you connect to Carl Jung? You, as of now on your Instagram, you're 14% through?
14% through the collected works. This is the largest project I've ever done.
It's amazing. It's incredible. Like what I guess if I had to distill my question would be like, what do you find especially unique for those who have never really checked out his works, and like what's resonated with you or stimulated you the most? I mean, you mentioned individuation process. I heard you speak about that one.
Right. So basically, when I was a kid, I was super interested in psychology and mythology. I don't know where I got this from, but like as like a 7 and 8-year-old, I was reading Greek myths, and like I don't come from an academic family. I don't come from a family that gave a shit, really. I just started to resonate with mythology, and I was always interested in psychology. And I think I was like 18 or 19, but I knew I wanted to become a psychologist, and I really like to try to go find, okay, who are the greatest people that did what I'm trying to do in recorded history, and I want to go study them. And I never really resonated with Freud. He's got amazing ideas, but like I also look at what type of life and who they were as like a personality. And I started reading Jung, and it's like the truth resonated so clearly through what he was saying. And he was the only person that I knew who merged mythology with the individual psyche. And there's a couple of strains of philosophy that I really got into when I was in my early 20s, basically pragmatism and existentialism and evolutionary biology. And then when you study Jung, his favorite philosopher was my favorite, which is Nietzsche. He was a fan of Darwin, and that's evolutionary psychology. And he was best friends with William James, who was the dude who kind of created pragmatism. So I was just like, okay, this dude is clearly one of the people that I need to be studying. And using psychedelics, trying to look at my dreams, it just like, he clearly is the guy that I do not yet fully understand what he was saying, but everything I've read of what he said, I'm like, okay, yeah.
Wow. Cool. You've mentioned psychedelics. Probably it's a long, another, I'd love to do this a few times with you, maybe. And you put Psychonaut, which I thought was interesting. I hadn't heard that term, and what, I guess like, what are your thoughts on like how it's, I guess, affected? I mean, it's a massive discussion, but like has changed your mind's perspective, and just in general, is there anything, what's coming to my mind right now is there something you feel that we, at least right now these days, do you feel that we humans are could use a mind perspective shift on, specifically like a certain aspect, whether it's anxieties, fears we have that can make us more elevated, happier in general, that not to you these days?
I think it comes down to So your psyche is the totality of your mental life. Most people, especially in the West, they think the conscious ego is the entire psyche. And that gives you, so you think that your thoughts are you. You think that your fears are you. And people are just led around by their fears and their insecurities and their ego. And what psychedelics did for me was viscerally put my ego in its place in my psyche. Like before I did psychedelics, the ego was on the throne of the kingdom of my mind. Once I did psychedelics, the ego was put in his place, which is to kneel to on the floor to the throne. And the thing in the throne is awareness or soul or consciousness, whatever word you want to use to describe the thing that witnesses the ego. Mm. And most people's lives are ran by a miscalibrated, neurotic, terrified ego that's on the throne trying to run the kingdom. And it's not meant to run the kingdom. It's meant to be a servant to the king that runs the kingdom. And the king is your awareness. And I think how that manifests in your life is that if you identify with the awareness and not the ego, you don't ever lie, because to lie is to fear. Basically, it's to fear the truth. And I do think that there are gray areas where you can speak in a way that helps someone that isn't in complete honesty, but those are the outliers. I'm talking 99% of your life. You should be radically honest and honest with yourself. Like a lot of people's lives, if their lives are fucked up, it's because they refused to look at and admit a truth about themselves that they already know. And so that's what I think psychedelics help the most, is it puts the ego in its place, which allows you the strength to walk in truth and to speak in truth and to act in truth.
Yeah, it's interesting. We fear a lot of that, what effects it can have on somebody. But on the other hand, I was thinking, isn't the biggest fear possible living your entire life, like you said, potentially not in truth? Like someone could go their entire life and never have that wake up moment face to face with the reality and be like, is this really the journey that I want to go on? Is this the direction I want to go? Which is it's a scary perspective, And I mean, we talk about, in Jewish mysticism, there's the idea of the animal soul and the godly soul. One is completely selfish, one is completely selfless. And funny enough, there's a book that I'm called the Tanya, I think it's chapter 9, where he focuses on a kingdom. And he says that there's it's a battle going on for basically rulership over your body or over yourself. These two are fighting. And then you have the intellectual soul, which is in the middle, that's kind of choosing between these two things.
Trying to mediate,
Yeah. And you said it's about speaking truthfully. What I find interesting is that when you're speaking to somebody, let's say, what is the level of truth? Because for them, if they're stuck in there's their perspective where they're not looking at it from their, let's say, soul higher perspective.
Right.
Like you said, we're a mixture of everything. So the truth sometimes can be a blend of, like, what's the truth? Truth. Maybe the truth is that we should be completely living a selfless, this soul life. But because we're a mixture of all these different things, like you said, we're blending it all together and trying to find that balance in soul and body. Someone's truth, it could be sometimes a little more, like when I want to say the straight truth to somebody, sometimes I'm like, half of that is making sure that they receive it in a way that they'll connect with. And therefore I have to dilute it, or I have to alter it. So that's like another art, because you could have a Nobel Prize professor teaching at Harvard and everyone's looking in blankly. Like, you are speaking the truth, but man, we need it in a way that we can internalize. So it's difficult for teachers.
That's a very good point. I think to say it more clearly, say the truth to the best of your ability in the moment. And I think that a part of that equation is like, you owe it to the human that you are looking to say it in a way where it resonates with them. And the way you do that, like our Meatsuit has a lot of intelligence in it, and we have evolved to look at another human face and try to understand its emotion for millions of years. So when you're talking to someone and you're trying to speak the truth, watch their face and listen. If they look blank, if they look like their eyes are glazed over, recalibrate. Like, don't be so egotistical to think that you don't have to change your message. No, like, the crowd is constantly teaching you how to update your ability to speak the truth. And so do it to the best of your ability, but always be trying to do it better.
Beautiful. Well put. And there's also an idea, it says that a man is a miniature world. So often in life and the things that are going on around us is sometimes that facial recognition. There's things
Yeah.
happening in our lives that we can react to and take lessons from and alter our course sometimes. Um, you, I'm just curious also, I mean, we were talking about how, how hectic it's been at your job and how awesome it is. What made you decide to, to join the Onnit team and Aubrey Marcus, who I only recently became more aware of, but I find him to be like really deeply insightful and interesting, and like, and how has your time so far affected you and seems to have an effect on your journey and everything?
For sure. So there's a lot of questions there. The first one is why Onnit? I fucking hate corporate mask, the whole dance that comes with what you have to do to be corporate and to have a corporate job. How people don't talk like humans, how every email is this fake speech. Like, I was dead set on trying to find my way in the world without being in corporate America. I was going to actually apply to become a clinical psychologist and go get a PhD and to try to be a practicing clinician. But I took Aubrey Marcus's Go For Your Win course a couple of years ago. And that course actually opened the day after I got fired from an insurance job that I fucking hated. And I was like, okay, you know what? I'll buy it. I bought it. I went all in. I was always active in the Facebook group. I was really trying to give my best. And he noticed. And I applied to a really low level job on a whim. And I didn't even have to interview. He recognized my name and he was like, yeah.
Wow.
And so I kind of found myself here, even though I was planning on going to graduate school. And this was the only company in my mind that I would have allowed myself to work at of the companies that I knew about, because I didn't want to do that corporate fake human shit. And you see how he is on social media. He's not going to run a company like that. And it's actually resonated in truth. I've been here for 9 months, and man, being around him in person and his people in person, they don't even have to teach me with words. Just watching their meat suits do their meat suit thing, I feel like in the last 9 months, I've grown more in my heart. Like, it sounds cliche, but like, I've grown more in my ability to navigate my meat suit life in authenticity and truth more than the last fucking 10 years.
Wow.
And so I'm happy to spend 10 or 12 hours here a day. Like, it's where I want to be. I tell people this and everyone says the same thing, but I still feel like it's my truth. And it's that my life is going so good right now that I feel bad telling other people about how good it is. But I really feel like I'm just hitting my marks, that I'm on the surfboard on the crest of a wave. And the more I continue to stay in truth and love as much as I possibly can, I get to stay on the surfboard. And I just feel like I've been on the wave since day one coming here.
I honestly think, and I know what you're saying, I also sometimes feel that guilt because there's so much pain out there.
Right.
But I think the more that you're taking in and growing, and because you're somebody who's giving that out, both on social media and, I mean, you have free ebooks. I'm ready to do, I have a holiday now, so I can't do your journaling 5-day thing because we don't write actually on the Sabbath.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I'm going to do it next when I have the 5 days. You're, the more we can take in and the more we're able to give, as you know. So like,
Correct.
I think the more that you're building yourself up and growing is just going to help more and more people. So I think you should definitely bask in it.
Yeah. And I think that that's probably the best response to that thing that I've said that I've gotten so far. Because basically what everyone says is don't feel bad. Like, I know I shouldn't, but I do. But I think what you're saying, I hear the truth in it right away. I'm growing this fast so that I can give back faster and larger and so on. So thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. And there are stages I've noticed in my journey too, where it's almost exponential growth sometimes, like
Right.
short little pockets where you're like, whoa, I had more happen in that short time than it's almost like
Right.
something a baby being like growing or something. It's like a lot more happens than maybe later on in life. There's, yeah, that's really special. Can you speak a little bit on, and I want to improve this in my life, to be honest, but
Right.
the power of being with a tribe or like-minded, or let's say people that help you grow, that are loving,
Yeah.
like how important is it to have those people, surrounding yourself with them and having those like positive voices in your life all
Yeah.
the time?
So a couple of things. One thing that I want to point out, because I used to be this person just a year ago, like I do not come from money. I've learned how to be poor, and I'm just now getting to a point in my life where I can like go out and buy food and not have to worry about it. And I wasn't around people who were great. I wasn't around anyone super on it. I didn't mean to pun there. I was.
Little
Anyways.
plug there. Very nice.
um, if you learn to read, you can go through our collective history and find the greatest humans who have ever lived, and they become your mentor if you read them every day. So people who say that they don't have access to mentors, no, that's false. Cultivate reading, and all the greatest humans that have ever lived have tried their best to put their best wisdom into books. They are your mentors. But that being said, there is something about being around people who are, quote unquote, further along the path than you, that if you're humble and hardworking, it accelerates. Like, you learn not just consciously, but unconsciously. And being around those type of people, you're learning unconsciously to a degree that is hard to articulate. But so if you can find those people, and the way that you find those people, at least what I have found and what I would offer people, is humble yourself enough to find out how you can actually be of value to these people who have hundreds of people trying to get their attention every day. Be of value, and then give them that value for free, consistently, without the expectation of them doing anything back. And this is where my woo side comes out. If it's meant to be, they will pick you. If it's not meant to be, either continue to do it because you do it for the love of the sake of doing it, or find other mentors. But even if no one picks you, you have Jesus, Buddha, Jung, all the philosophers, all the greatest kings and rulers and artists in books.
That's so true, man. It's like, I also think there's a quality of books over, I mean, movies and documentaries and social media, and a lot of this generation's time that's focused on it. I think that it's taking more of your mind and putting it the way it wants you to think. Whereas a book, it's more of you kind of internalizing it in a way that you can, of course, you're learning new wisdom, but you're integrating it more into your world as opposed to being sucked into a different world. And I mean, I spent 6 years of yeshiva Torah study. It was basically 7 a.m. to 11 at night, straight, just books. And you sit with a guy across from you, and that's how he learns. There's no classroom. It's just you and another person going over this old text from like thousands of years ago in ancient Hebrew, Aramaic.
A part of me loves that, and a part of me dreads that.
It's only if you're really, really curious and fascinated about learning about it, But no, you're 100% right. I think I saw a picture on Instagram or something recently. It was like a boy and girl, like 10 years old, walking in a park. It's like a cartoon, and they're in the park, and then in front of them is like a galaxy. And the idea was like, when you're in good conversation with somebody, you can transport yourself. And I do believe there's like, and your Instagrams all often have this imagery. It's really, I love it. It's not just what we see. Like, according to Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism, what we see is the final manifestation of realities deeper and deeper going on forever. Right. So they all hint to the level above it. We can learn from everything we see to a level beyond. But when you're learning a book or when you're studying something, you are now not in the physical world. You are now in the world of wisdom. You are not in the same, because a lot of people think heaven is like, maybe it's past Jupiter, or like it's just another realm of reality that's right here. You know, I heard.
And hell are here.
Say again.
Heaven and hell are here.
Yes. I heard a story. You probably know it better than me, but there was a story. It was like a Buddhist monk, or one of these old warriors of that time came to him and said, "Show me heaven and hell." So he was quiet for a moment. He looked at him and he said, "You're an idiot." He's like, "What?" He said, "You're an idiot. You're like the dumbest person I've ever seen." He's like, "How dare you? I asked you a good question. Like answer me." He's like, "You're a fool. You're not worthy of hearing it." So this warrior's like, back in the day, there was no like 0 to 100. He pulls out his sword, ready to kill this man. And the monk says, "You're now in hell." And then he thinks about it for a second, and he calms himself, and he puts it back in. He says, "Now you're in heaven."
Yeah.
Like it's a state or a realm.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So a couple of things come out of my head when you say what you said. The first thing is that the way I understand reality is that from an evolutionary psychology perspective, well, first from a physics perspective, there are no objects. Objects are something that the human Meatsuit generates based off of objective stimuli, so you can act in a way that allows you to defend yourself long enough for you to procreate. It's basically like the code that your Meatsuit uses to interpret reality to generate what you see. Like, I'm never able to explain this, at least yet, as well as I want to, but take a rock, for example. Without the human to perceive a rock, the rock is infinitely long in time. The beginning of the rock starts at the Big Bang, and the end of the rock ends at the end of the universe. The rock is all of that at the same time. There's also no spatial boundary between the rock. There's no human apparatus to perceive the rock. What I'm trying to say is that objective reality seems to be an infinite potential of atoms, or whatever word you want to use to explain it. And it's the human nervous system that takes that, and then your body unconsciously creates a simulation. Because like what you see, what everyone is hearing right now is being generated electrically inside your head. Everything you've ever seen has been an electrical generated phenomena that your Meatsuit does automatically based off of objective reality. You don't get to objective reality. And so I think that that's a scientific way to say the same truth that all the religions have been telling you, is that there's the profane world or the mundane world or whatever, and then there's the higher world. And so that's one of it. The thing that you talked about, the heaven and hell thing, I think that that's so apt to what we were talking about earlier. And it's that you have a Meatsuit, and then inside of that Meatsuit is consciousness or awareness. If you are undisciplined, the Meatsuit will lead you around. Anger is something that comes from the Meatsuit. Your awareness is never angry. It witnesses anger. And when we're unconscious, we think we are the anger. That's hell. But I think what Eastern mysticism has really gotten to, that I kind of don't like, is that they also want to pull you out of heaven. They don't want you to experience heaven or hell, because that's the dichotomy of being in the Meatsuit possession. And so I think the best of both worlds is to learn the ability to see that both heaven and hell are not the awareness, but then you get to constantly choose heaven over and over and over and over and over.
Yeah, that's really nice. I again, this is a whole, we need more time for it, but each of these things are endless. But when you talked about I don't know enough about Eastern tradition to make this commentary, but the little bit I know, I feel like what you just said is highlighting the idea of, in Hebrew, be hishtabo, to be like, not, what's the word for not really, not being attached to anything, and therefore not caring, even holy or profane, disattachment. I think if you had to like distill down my belief within Judaism, it's bringing heaven down to earth. It's like the idea of like, we're really into like, you get married, you have children, like we have wine at every holy occasion, good food. But the idea is like not to have the wine for its sake, and not to just be spiritual on a mountaintop. The goal is to somehow, the hardest challenge ever, because it's easier to be extreme. I prefer it personally.
I completely agree.
It's to somehow blend the two and merge it, and bring holiness into everything that we do, to elevate like everything that we're coming in touch with. Because that's, everything, everywhere we go, every place we go, according to Hasidic thought, is like, I might be in this place. This whole time of history was just so that one human would come to this location in the middle of wherever it is, in Austin, San Diego, Nepal, go to this place and do something good, have an elevated thought, see a mountaintop and say, how divine is this incredible place, and that may have elevated the whole reason it was there in the first place. So that's our job. Like, we're these warriors going everywhere trying to fight in the darkness. And that goes back to Adam and Eve. That whole story is the concept of them. They were naive children, like, oh, let's disobey. The deeper sources say they chose. They said it's better to envelop ourselves in darkness and bring light there. Now, whether it was the right decision, my dad always says, I wish they gave me a choice in the matter. I don't want to die I wish I could live the way they did. But
see, and like you said a lot of really great things. I think the way I think about reality is that I don't know if there's anything that happens to my awareness after my meat suit dies. I have not yet had experiences that make me believe that there will be something. So I'm agnostic to that. But what it seems like the case is that we are all like children making sandcastles on a beach. Our life work, all the things that our ego is invested in is that castle. Entropy is the tidal wave that is coming. Everything that we do will return to dust eventually. So that's not why we do it. It's not to erect statues. We do it because every other person alive on this planet is on the beach. And a lot of them are freaking the fuck out. And you can make a castle beautifully, both in the way you do it and how it looks, to a degree that inspires everyone else who sees you make your castle. And so I think that's what gives life meaning, is how you live. Like if you live in a way that brings heaven to earth, that brings light to darkness, that brings just a little bit of comfort to all the people suffering, you've done the best that you can. You've done as much as you can. And I think that that's both the humble path, because you're doing it on a one-on-one basis. You're not trying to change the world by, changing the governmental system or overthrowing the economic system. You're trying to be a good person to the person who's providing you food, like to the waitress. But it's also super grandiose in that you believe that every time you do that, you are contributing to the light of humanity.
Beautiful, man. That's awesome. A lot of wisdom there, and I've got the visualization. I love how you kind of bring in I think it's so important to have analogies, and you can just say an idea,
Sure.
but
That's how we think. Yeah,
absolutely. On that note, I want to thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed our discussion, and I hope we can do it again sometime.
absolutely. And we can for sure do more of these, brother.
I love it. And we can find you online, Erick Godsey. There's a lot of good material you give out for free, very interesting stuff. So definitely everyone should check you out.
Will do. Thank you, sir.
Awesome, man. Have an awesome rest of your day, and talk to you soon.
Likewise, brother. Thank you.
Na 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 na